Hi, I'm Wendelin Gray, and this is my second video in my video series reading of the Lucky Cat series volume 3, Lucky Cat and the Gods of War. So in this segment, I'm going to start with Chika Hagiwara's dossier and get a little bit more into the action in a couple decades after where we just left off in the previous section. Section 1. The village of Tyosha, Nizhny Novgorod Oblast, 2101 AD, 3 months after the Hagiwara's expulsion from New Bangkok. Wake up! Something's wrong. Can you feel it? The urgency in Dorio's voice managed to penetrate Chika's deep sleep, though she hadn't slept well most nights since they arrived in Tyosha anyway. Sitting up, still half asleep, she yawned and opened her eyes. The room was dark with just a sliver of moonlight gleaming through the thin cracks between the heavy drapes on the window. She glanced over at Dorio. "Something's wrong every night, hon," she said softly, pulling him close even though she couldn't really see him in the darkness. Her voice was still thick with sleep and her mind dull with visions of the frightening woman who haunted her dreams. "You know I have an appointment scheduled with the village's sleep clinic coming up soon to deal with this. Did you have a bad dream tonight too?" "No, nothing like that. I thought I heard some commotion outside, not far from the house." "Commotion?" Chika snapped awake and pulled the blankets up around her. When they first arrived in the village, they realized it was no different from New Bangkok, though the surveillance was much more unobtrusive, since no telescreens were required in most homes and businesses. Still, the presence of an electrical barbed wire fence around the village perimeter, the front gate checkpoint, and the large network of cameras on the streets reminded them of what Tyosha really was. Dorio had counted at least 20 of the 7-foot-tall, heavily armed AI sentinels regularly patrolling the fence and watching over the comings and goings of the village at the checkpoint. As new arrivals to the village, their little group had to contend with an initial face scan and search by the robots before they were escorted to their cottage near the center of town. Once they were home, their warmly decorated cottage became a refuge from the streets, when it was soon undeniable that they were prisoners there after a fashion. "I thought I heard screaming and the crackling sound outside," Dorio said, throwing off the covers and slipping on his shoes. "The barbed wire? Isn't it electrified? Perhaps someone tried to escape," Chika said, also sitting up. She strained to see him in the dark as he walked toward the bedroom door. "We shouldn't go out if that's the case. Won't we get in trouble too?" "We'll only go as far as the porch. Maybe the edge of the yard. I know how dangerous it is. I have no intention of getting in their way. Valentine will probably have heard it and will be up too. Should I come? I'm under restrictions after all." Dorio paused as he opened the door. She could see the dim light from the living room, where Valentine and Suna were already whispering, and seeing everyone was going outside to investigate the sounds. Chika also threw off the covers and felt for her shoes. "Come if you want, but stay close to the house behind everybody," Dorio said finally before getting to the living room to join the others. Chika scrambled for her robe as she slid on her shoes, but when she reached the living room and saw Valentine's nervous look, she paused. He glanced over at her. "I just got done telling your mother to stay in the house," he said grimly. "The sentinels likely killed someone trying to get out of the village. It won't be pleasant to see. You should stay here too." "I need to see it," Chika said without thinking. "I'm always cooped up in here and have barely left the cottage in the 3 months since we arrived. I know not to go too far or to be seen by the sentinels. I just need to see what they're capable of." "Do as you think best," Valentine said as he and Dorio went out the back door, which was closest to where the hissing, sizzling sound was coming from. Chika looked back at Suna a moment. "Are you coming?" "I'll probably have to be on hand at the clinic to help with the dead anyway," Suna said. "So there's really nothing to see at this point. It's not like they'll let me treat the victim before they die." Nodding sadly, Chika quickly followed Valentine and Dorio outside. The night was cool, but Chika immediately felt a ripple of heat in the air and caught a whiff of the scent of burning flesh. She came up to stand next to Dorio where he waited near the edge of the garden that hugged the perimeter of the house. Valentine stood a few paces ahead of them. Looking across the yards between the houses, Chika thought she could see flames burning something that was hanging from the barbed wire fence many streets over at the village's edge. Light from the streetlights glinted off the metal bodies, of the sentinels as they gathered around the dead body. "What happened?" Chika asked in a low voice. "Someone tried to escape for sure, or they just got too close to the fence," Doryo said, whispering back. "I heard people were concerned that a few of the town drunks might get in trouble some night walking too close to it, but it might be political and not accidental. You know how it is in Eurasia." A dim blue light flickered briefly along the fence as the sentinels disabled the electrical charge so they could retrieve the body. After a few minutes of standing outside, Chika pulled her robe more tightly around her as the three of them watched the sentinels shoot the burning figure once with their guns to make sure the victim was dead before lifting the body off the barbed wire fence and dragging it away. Then the blue light flickered along the wire fence again as the sentinels turned the current back on. Suddenly the whole village lit up with its emergency lights as the streetlights were turned up to their brightest capacity. As they swept the area searching for any observers watching them to get rid of the body, the sentinels seemed to turn and look at them, though Chika was sure the sentinels were able to see with their telescopic vision no matter how low the streetlights were kept. "This is what happens to those disobedient to the state." The booming voice of one of the sentinels echoed throughout the village as if it were coming from loudspeakers, giving Chika a shiver. "But they don't really know, do they? Everything has to be some sort of threat to the populace with them," she murmured to Doryo softly, and he turned toward her in alarm. Grabbing her arm, he pulled her roughly back into the house, just as the sentinels were yelling more about how they would punish villagers who were outside observing the spectacle and declaring the dead victim just a confused drunk who went the wrong way. Valentine came quickly behind them, watching Doryo and Chika warily. Once Doryo shoved Chika into the house, he waited for Valentine to enter before coming in and slamming and barring the door behind them. "What good does this do, Doryo?" Chika asked, nearly laughing. "They make you think you're keeping them out when we're really just prisoners here anyway. They could come in at any time if they wanted to." Was it what we thought?" Suna asked Valentine as he came over to where she sat on the couch in the living room. Both of them ignored Chika. "From the little I could make out of the clothing, it was probably not one of the village drunks who just got too close to the wires. But you should find out for sure when you go to the clinic in the morning. You'll be able to identify the body in spite of whatever the sentinels release publicly about the victim, and we'll see all of the markings to determine the true cause of death. Yet they warned us against escape anyway, even though they're saying in their official story so far that it was just a drunk," Chika said, coming over a few steps as Doryo grabbed her waist and led her back around to their bedroom. "You need to stop with this," he whispered in her ear as they entered the bedroom and he closed the door. "I'm sick of seeing Valentine's pitying expression when you get started on your little rants. What if someone overhears you and reports you?" "You worry too much," she said, pulling off her robe and sitting on her side of the bed. "No one will do anything, so no matter what they hear. It's all like little lab rats who are too scared to move." "What am I going to do with you? You're too rebellious. I worry you'll get their attention and what? Get sent back to the punishment center like I was when I was a child. You know, seeing that man burned to a crisp on the wires does remind me a bit of the punishment center." "I know you don't like to think about it," Doryo said, cutting her off as he always did when she brought up the subject. The punishment centers were legendary places of pain and cruelty that most polite Eurasian society liked to pretend didn't exist. Her husband was no different. "Try to behave so you don't get taken away again, okay? I love you and need you here with me." Crawling into bed beside her, he leaned over to where she sat on the edge of the bed and kissed her cheek in the dark. She ruffled his hair affectionately. "I'll try, but you know what a troublemaker I am." Isn't that why you married me?" she asked lightly. Tossing off her shoes, she slid back under the now cold covers and snuggled up to him, shivering. "Now, time to go back to my other nightmares. When do you have your appointment with the sleep clinic?" "In a few days. It's just a preliminary consultation for sleep disruption treatment, though. Valentine tells me he was able to talk to the movements of our undercover liaison there. Hopefully I'll get to learn the secret handshake and passwords so I, too, can become a spy like Valentine and Aunt Suna. I want to make myself useful now that we're free from the telescreens." "I don't know how easy that will be, Chika," Doryo said, putting his arm around her. "You haven't been given permission to do much outside the house, so how will you be able to spy or meet anyone? Try not to get too carried away with the movement's mission. Sure, it's good to want freedom and to return to at least some of the old ways, but don't get yourself, or us, killed over it. I'll try to be careful." Kissing him lightly on the nose, she closed her eyes, ready to return to the vision of the woman's face that never left her during sleep. Oddly, she felt she would meet the woman soon, and wondered if the sleep clinic held all of her answers. Next is Chapter 4. We'll get to the sleep clinic. "Thank you for coming today," Dr. Morozov said as she and Chika finished their 30-minute session. "You can make an appointment for your next treatment at the front desk. I want you to journal the amount of time you sleep every night, tracking any interruptions and how long they last in this notebook for us to review when you return next month. We'll talk more about how you're adjusting from city life to country life. I know the pace is different, and as a young girl newlywed, that adds to the strain. We'll come up with some solutions to see that you get a good night's sleep. Now, I see you need to speak with Dr. Joe about another special study analyzing dreams. I'll call for him while you speak with the receptionist." Sliding the notebook into the large pocket of her backpack, Chika went out to the receptionist's desk and punched the date when she'd be free to come back into the electronic calendar, wondering briefly if Doria would insist on walking her to that appointment as well. Once the receptionist on the other side of the glass hit the confirm command and her ticket printed out, Chika turned, hearing the sound of footsteps coming down the hall behind her. Like any medical clinic, the sleep clinic had polished white tile floors and blandly colored plasterboard walls. She could hear Dr. Joe the moment he stepped into the hallway, his dress shoes snapping against the bare floor. Milosh Joe was a handsome man with Asian features, though not much younger than Valentin, her stepfather. He seemed to be assessing her as he approached. "Mrs. Ando?" he asked hesitantly when he reached the waiting room. No one else was there. "Of course. You must be Dr. Joe. Valentin mentioned he spoke with you." She held out her hand to him, and he shook it briefly before gesturing that she follow him back down the hall. "Let's talk more about that in my office. It's down a few levels, not easily accessible from the waiting area. The clinic is quite a maze." The sleep clinics were a network of superstate control facilities used to monitor the populace closely and report anything suspicious to the authorities. However, the underground resistance, known as the Movement, had infiltrated it early, which had been quite an impressive feat since the sleep clinics had a facility in every town and city. Many of their operatives had been able to take over the basement of each of the facilities and turn it to their own clandestine purposes. Milosh clearly had followed this pattern. After going through a series of hallways and taking 2 elevators, they finally reached the lowest level of the clinic, floor B3. Once the doors of the elevator closed behind them and they were alone, Milosh Joe turned to Chika, his face full of concern, even fear. "Yevgenia was worried when she heard you and your family were expelled from New Bangkok. We were on the alert the second Valentin disappeared and intercepted his homing signal immediately once he reached this village. There are worse places than Tiosha you could have ended up, though. I'm glad we finally meet you and to hear you're doing well. Yevgenia will be relieved too when I make my report to her." He gestured for her to sit down on a chair near a gurney. Did they do surgery in this place that anyone would need to lay down? Chika thought. Maybe they had you sleep and put you on a special monitor to measure your brainwaves. She tried to think back to everything Valentin had told her about the clinics in his days working with the sleep monitors. "We were worried too, but the house is nice, and Hansu Singh has been far more generous than we expected," Chika said coolly, grimacing in distaste at the mention of her adversary's name. "But we aren't here to talk about Hansu Singh, are we?" Milosh asked mildly as he sat down on the chair across from her. His desk was at the far side of the room, and they sat in a small reception area almost knee to knee. "I understand some other questions have been rippling through the movement members over the past few months. Have you heard those stories? Of the lost operative in Yoshima and the Empress? I dream about the Empress all the time, but only vaguely understand who she is." "You dream about her all the time? Not many of the members of the movement have reported that consistent an experience with her. Have you thought about joining the movement? Has your stepfather Valentin told you much about it? Agent Sakai was very well respected and a hard worker for our cause back at the New Bangkok Sleep Clinic." "I've thought about it. The superstate leaders, particularly Hansu Singh, hate me for what my mother was. But what was she really? An artist? It seems like such a flimsy reason to murder someone and punish me. I want to get revenge on them for what they've done to my family, and if joining the movement is the only way to do that, then I'm willing." You've thought through the consequences to such an action?" Milosh asked gently. Chika thought he had a kind face and wondered briefly if he had a family. What other motives brought a man like him into the dangerous underground anyway? "I decided to marry an untouchable back in New Bangkok, and my mother, well, my aunt, asked me that same question over and over again. Maybe I'm not one to make decisions with all that much deliberation. I live more by instinct. I'll worry about the consequences later." "An instinct says she should join us?" "I think I should." Milosh nodded in satisfaction and quickly walked across the room to a small samovar he had on the counter of the office's makeshift kitchen. "Would you like some tea? It will calm your nerves, and it's technically part of the official treatment we offer to keep up appearances that we're doing legitimate business with you." Chika smiled in grim amusement. "Keeping up appearances? As you know, when you consult with movement liaisons in the sleep clinics, it isn't a real treatment we're offering, but the tea is good and can put you in your chart to cover up the real reason why you're here. It's just enough to look like a medical intervention." "You clearly have all of your bases covered. What kind of tea is it?" "Tavoga, with raspberry leaves." "I'll take a cup. So what is the rest of the treatment at this point now that I've accepted a position in the underground? Do I get an assignment? Have you talked with Valentin and Suna since we arrived?" Milosh handed her cup of tea to her and poured himself some before sitting back down across from her. "Yes, I've talked with Valentin and Suna, and they're already working undercover here to the extent that they can in these limited circumstances. I believe Suna mentioned something to you about our suspicions regarding the death at the electric fence the other night, didn't she?" "You're the doctor that wants to investigate further and identify the woman who was killed?" Chika asked, looking up in surprise. "Of course, that makes sense. She said the Sentinels seemed uninterested and that there would be no inquiry. The town assumes it was some drunk who got too close to the fence." "Yes, we talked to all of the populace at these clinics and have a better idea than the Sentinels of who was actually involved in what kind of situation. I believe the victim may have been a particular woman who disappeared a few months ago. She's been involved in a very dangerous situation. But this isn't your assignment, so let your aunt work on that. I have something else in mind for you. Since you have stronger bond with this woman known as the Empress, who has been appearing particularly to movement allies in our sleep, I want you to start really paying attention to your impressions of her. Can you talk to her in your dreams? If you can, what does she say? Is there some way we can communicate with her through you? Would you be willing to delve deeper into that mystery?" "I can try. She's frightening, but intriguing." "When are you scheduled to come back to speak with Dr. Morozov?" Milosh asked, changing the subject abruptly. "Next month. She gave me a journal to write down my sleep patterns." "Don't write anything down for me. It's important no one can accidentally come across your conversations with the Empress if you can have them. Memorize what you can and come tell me in person what you're able to find out. With your house arrest, which has been personally noted by Hansu Singh as part of your punishment in your chart forwarded to us by the New Bangkok Sleep Clinic, there's not too much else you can do for us at this stage. Start there and we'll talk again at your next appointment." "Did Dorio talk with you about joining the movement? Every time I mention it to him, he doesn't want to talk about it and just says one of us needs to stay clean and only focus on pleasing the super state." "Are you worried about him? Shouldn't he join like the rest of the family?" "Maybe in good time he will. Try not to let it bother you. It happens sometimes that family members can feel uncomfortable with all of the risk associated with the movement. You said he lived among the untouchable class in New Bangkok, so perhaps his caution is just part of how he's used to living. He may just want to protect you now that your fortunes have been so adversely affected, or he may feel guilty about what has happened. It wasn't entirely his fault, though his untouchable status certainly sped things along for us. Finish your tea and relax here. I can turn some music on for you, or you can take a nap on the gurney if you choose. You have another 15 minutes before the appointment ends, and you shouldn't leave the B3 office early, since it could affect our cover later when we really need the extra time. Can we just talk a little more before I go? I don't see many people these days since I work at home, and everyone is too tired to be concerned with me by the time they get home. It's nice to visit someone and have a chat." Milosh smiled and took another sip of tea. "We can talk if you like. What do you want to talk about?" "Dolls. Have you heard the rumors surrounding my mother's death and the horrors in Ninyoshima?" Yevgenia told me something that had happened. I understand it's connected somehow with this operative who disappeared there. But that's all I heard. What more do you know? She gave Valentine the digital files the operative in Miyoshima sent before she disappeared, and it showed my mother in some sort of ghostly state and this large doll that moved around as if she were alive. The Empress in my dreams looks like that doll in the video. Do you think that's important somehow? What do dolls have to do with anything? And you don't know. My mother was a doll maker, among other things. She also made statues and other knickknacks people liked to buy from the tourist district in Tokyo before the war destroyed Japan and we were forced to move to Eurasia. My aunt believes the superstate murdered my mother back there, and that the dolls she made somehow came to life and turned dangerous. They came to life? That seems quite unreasonable to believe, but we are the underground after all. We understand things a bit differently from the superstate's official line. Is it possible? Are they still looking for this operative who went missing? The world is a strange place, Chika Ando. It's hard to say, isn't it? Living with the most terrible things we have to every day. It wouldn't be the most outrageous news I've heard about this situation. No, from what Yevgeny has said, all of the evidence points to the operative's death. Killed by the Empress then, eh? Why do you say that? Is that what the Empress is? A doll? Haven't you noticed when you dream of her? There's an odd stillness about her, though she looks refined otherwise. When I see her, she's always the same. She's beautiful, but she just stares at me with no particular expression. I can feel her emotions more than see them on her face. Maybe she says something, but her lips never move. I've dreamt of her here and there, but never that clearly. They fell silent and finished drinking their tea. When the session was over, Milosh escorted her back up to the main level and had the receptionist add another 30-minute session with him to her next appointment. Pushing open the door, she looked back at him and smiled, waving slightly before she disappeared into the crowded market district a few blocks away. Okay, next is going to be section 7, and we get to visit the castle and meet the Empress. Chika looked up in amazement. Indeed, she and Shanalandra were standing before an enormous keep that stood 7 stories tall, its curving tile rooftops reminding Chika of the tiered pagodas from her early childhood in Japan. The black wood of the keep walls complemented the black feather wings of the enormous bird that poked out of the sides of the keep. The crow's head loomed above the highest rooftop and was cocked slightly to the side. Its eyes closed in sleep, and 3 spindly legs lifted the keep's entrance at least 1 story off the ground, just out of reach. What a strange sight, Chika thought. When Chika obeyed Shanalandra's command and stepped over the edge of the keep's shadow on the grass, the bird's head suddenly straightened and its eyes opened. Seeing them waiting below, it dropped the keep onto the plain so the entrance would now be within reach. Chika had been invited in for an audience with the owner of Nambata Castle, the Empress of her nightmares, and she walked toward the gate leading to the stone foundation to the keep's wooden doors. A light shone from the open front doors, warm and inviting, in spite of the strange surroundings. As Chika walked through them, Shanalandra climbed up Chika's arm to sit on her shoulder, the cat's claws digging into her sweater a little. No one seemed to be around. The door shut abruptly behind her, making her jump. Looking back toward them, she saw they had moved of their own accord. Feeling the floor pitch a little, Chika realized the crow was standing again, keeping out any intruders while she had an audience with the Empress. She walked through the first gallery of polished wooden floors and pillars, looking around the room curiously. A few walls were covered with rich tapestries that seemed to originate from countries other than Japan, though Chika couldn't place their style or meaning. A few long tatami mats covered the floor under the line of short windows that ran along the far wall. In a dim corner stood an odd statue that looked like a merman sitting on his curled tail, propping himself up with a tall trident in one hand. The rest of the gallery was empty, and when she reached a wooden staircase leading to the next level, she ascended. "Why are you so quiet?" she asked Shanalandra as they reached the second floor, unmindful of the way her voice echoed oddly through the rooms. "Don't you know where we're supposed to be going? She's your master, isn't she?" "She's our leader, yes. You have guessed right," Shanalandra said, squinting at Chika. "But I haven't been here before myself, though I've longed to come for a visit. Rumor has it they live on the 4th floor." When they got to the next landing, Chika glanced down a narrow corridor lined with vertical lattice windows and saw more of the polished wooden floors punctuated by wooden columns. Another tapestry, this time one that showed native Japanese fruit and flowers, hung at the far end of the corridor. Still, the gallery was deserted. The fourth floor, you said. Chika paused to look around and saw another open-step wooden staircase leading up to the third floor and walked over to it. The stairs only led into darkness, so Chika paused a moment before going up the staircase slowly to give her eyes time to adjust to the light. As she reached the top step, she sensed someone was there waiting for them at last. Turning toward the figure as she reached the next gallery, Chika saw a woman standing before a set of heavy wooden doors. Over 7 feet tall, the woman wore a loose floral kimono over a fashionable formal dress, designed in some hybrid Japanese cocktail-style dress style in a modern purple print. As Chika came closer, she noticed how the low light glinted unnaturally off of the woman's elegant, unmoving features, almost as if her face had been covered in a light varnish. The woman's long, glossy black hair was pulled loosely into a messy chignon and held a purple fan with Japanese script scrawled across it up to her face a moment, a demure, confusing move that Chika thought suggested youthful playfulness. "So you made it this far. I wasn't sure if I should come down to get you and escort you in, since many people fear Nambata Castle, as they should." "You've been expecting me," Chika said. "Are you the Empress?" "Oh no, certainly not," the woman said, pulling the fan away from her face and bending slightly down toward Chika. Chika was struck again at how rigid her face looked, though it was beautifully carved and youthful. Only the doll's dark, gray-brown eyes moved from side to side, and her jaw moved only slightly as she talked. "I'm one of the attendants, a dancer in the royal court. My name is Lutetia Dolphy. I'm sure we'll become fast friends now that you've arrived to serve her, Princess of Nambata Castle." "I'm sorry, but what did you call me?" Chika asked, trying not to laugh at the joke. Was she the princess of the dolls? Perhaps they thought so since her mother had made them. "You don't understand," Lutetia wailed dramatically in dismay. "Then let me show you around the secret places of the castle. This will help you see. Today you have come to be crowned our helper, though perhaps the Empress will not give you such a grandiose title as I would, since I'm much younger than her and I don't always understand the way she runs the royal court." "What do you want to show me? It's hard to see much of anything but shadows on this floor." "Let me take you through the doors here. This is the entrance to the Kuraya-Niju behind me. Since I'm with you, you may enter the forbidden doors, but you must never enter it alone." The Kuraya-Niju. I'm not fluent in Japanese anymore and haven't been since childhood. What is this place? Am I not here to meet with the Empress? "Yes, but you should see this room first," Lutetia said. Reaching out for Chika's arm with a rigid hand, Lutetia's wrist swiveled enough to expose the ball joint as she pulled Chika along with her through the doors that were slowly opening at their approach. "This is the windowless floor we call the Dark Floor. It serves as a source of Nambata Castle's power. Enter, please, and see for yourself what has generated the anomaly that is the castle and has energized our phantom existence." Lutetia pushed Chika gently through the doorway into the blinding light that hurt her eyes after standing in the dim gallery. The room was wide and bright, and a cool breeze blew through it. Chika couldn't see very far into the room because of the thick cloud of swirling snowflakes that surrounded her. A blizzard filled the room, soft and angry, the snowflakes dancing furiously as they glistened in the inexplicable brightness that had no source. As one brushed against Chika's cheek, it nearly burned her skin with the strong emotion it contained, a jumble of fear, despair, and hatred. How can such a beautiful snowflake hold such rage and power, Chika thought. Such power brings much vengeance, another voice seemed to answer. Holding out her hand, Chika let a few of the snowflakes fall onto her palm. This time they didn't burn her, but as she looked at them, she thought she could almost see human eyes and faces within the glittering reflection. Caught in the ice crystals, the souls of the dead wept with displeasure at their fate. Chika felt overwhelmed with sadness and other less identifiable emotions. Taking a step back, letting the snowflakes fall from her hand, she bumped into Lutetia. "What is this place? Who were these people? They were living before, weren't they?" she asked Lutetia, looking back at the doll. They are the dead, Lutetia said, her voice full of emotion, even as her face remained an impassive mask. Her gray-brown eyes clicked back and forth from the snow floating around them to Chika and Shanalandra. The superstates have drowned the world in the blood of innocence. For many years these souls have waited for revenge and have found no peace. Why are they here? Are all of them here? Yes, they all have gathered here with us. The Empress felt it was time for the grudge to become real, and for those wronged most by the state to take up arms their own way. What power do you mortals have against the superstate anyway? We, on the other hand, have an advantage over you since we are no longer bound by their laws. Should the dead only remain silent and watch what's happening from afar? It hardly seems fair to expect that of them, after all they have lost. Is this the meaning of the curse and the awakening of the dolls? Chika asked, following Lutetia out of the Kurayamiji. The door shut gently behind them as Lutetia led her to the next set of stairs going up to the Empress's quarters. Lutetia ignored her question, or at least didn't seem to hear it. When they reached the top of the stairs, they entered a wide room with tatami mats on the floor where the Empress, the Emperor, and their retinue of musicians and dancers sat. A line of 6 beehive-shaped windows ran along each wall on either side of the gallery. Another set of open stairs rose to the 5th floor at the far end of the gallery, and Chika assumed their living quarters probably were upstairs, since the audience hall was on this floor. A pair of small blue cats that resembled Shanalandra peeked down from the upper floor at them, but Chika's attention was drawn back to the court as she stumbled into one of the short pedestals decorating the room. Crying out as the vase of luxurious milk-white roses that sat on it tumbled to the floor. Chika couldn't grab the vase fast enough, but one of the men of the court had swiftly come forward and caught it before it could smash to pieces on the wooden floor. Looking up into his face, which was now very close to hers, Chika could smell the heavy, earthy scent of clay on his breath, and curiously studied his handsome, fixed features. His straight black hair was short and styled in the scruffy modern cut, with his clothes looked more casual than the woman's, looking more like a costume for a rock band than a royal court. Feeling distracted by his beauty and as his dark brown glass eyes clicked into position to look directly at her, Chika touched his face without thinking. The cold surface of the ceramic, covered with a layer of light varnish, still felt rather pleasant even if it was also very inhuman. Fleetingly, she was reminded of the sentinels before she suddenly realized what she was doing and quickly pulled her hand away. "The roses are beautiful," she murmured. "I'm sorry I nearly crushed them, and for my disrespect." Although the man's facial expression didn't change, Chika sensed the man's amusement as he looked at her up and down a moment before handing her one of the roses. "For your garden, Princess," he said in a low voice. Glancing around the room at the other dolls, who were watching their exchange in silence, Chika wondered what was happening. Her eyes lingered only on the most beautiful doll at the center of the court, who clearly was the Empress herself, a woman wearing the white kimono with black lace that Chika had seen in the photos from Fujimi City. Chika took the rose without meeting the man's gaze, and he stood the pedestal back up and replaced the vase upon it. As the man walked back to the rest of the court and took his place in the position of the Empress's consort on the mats, Chika was horrified at her mistake. The man she touched was the Emperor? "Come forward, Chika Hagiwara," the Empress said, standing and taking a few steps beyond the men and women sitting around her on the floor. Lutetia still waited by the stairs leading down to the 3rd floor and didn't move. Chika looked at the Empress anxiously, studying the mask-like face, remembering the way it had filled her dreams for months now. Other images from the videos she saw from the missing operative's digital files also came back to her, a fearsome, bloody doll with the tilted head promising death to the viewer. Now the Empress looked calm and regal, unnaturally beautiful and forever young in her palace surroundings. Like all of the dolls of the royal court, she also towered over Chika, 7 feet tall. "Welcome to my home, Nambata Castle," the Empress said, taking a few slow steps around Chika as if to size her up. Shanalandra shifted a little on Chika's shoulder to keep the Empress in her sights, and Chika could feel the little cat's pulse speed up in ecstasy at achieving her goal of meeting her idol. "Tonight we will give you the ceremonial duties if you are willing to accept them. Once the ritual is complete, we will return to your home and protect you from the sentinels, but you will return to help us with our mission when the time is right. The movement is far-flung, and we are not human. We need your lips to speak for us." Chika turned her head to look at the Empress as she came around her on the other side, but got a mouthful of Chanalandra's fur instead, since the cat couldn't sit still. The cat's tail swept across Chika's face as the Empress came back to stand before her. The doll's dark, black-brown eyes clicked to the side to look at Chanalandra a moment, before shifting abruptly back to Chika. "This little creature served me well, and it's good you've kept this one close to you. She'll bring you when I summon you, so be sure to listen to her. In the meantime, you must decide what you will do. We are very grateful to your parents for their help in our endeavor. Even now, their spirits mingle with the dead in the storm of the Karaimi too. Now is your turn to serve us too." "What am I to do for you, Empress?" Chika felt a little apprehensive around the strong, tall figures, but she also felt this was where she was always meant to be. The superstate was her enemy too. "Take on the role of the Speaker of the Dead for the royal court of Nambata Castle. The ceremony will be short, but potent. You have already touched the snowflakes in the Karaimi too, and have not been rejected by them. You will be acceptable to us as our envoy to the living. We will take you to see some of our allies around the world, since the castle is not bound by any laws of nature to one spot, though our night wanderings will wait for another visit. Tonight you must decide if you will accept your new role." "Can't you speak for yourselves?" "We are not natural creatures, though not all of us are of the same kind of bakemono," the Empress said cryptically. Though her face barely moved, Chika was sure she smiled a little at the thought. "We don't speak as humans do, which is why we have begun to contact our allies through dreams. And you see us here now. Are we not a fearsome sight? Not many would want to speak with us face to face, and I only invite a select few here for an audience." "I can help if that's what you want. What must I do to become Speaker of the Dead?" One of the men sitting in the front row of the mats quickly stood and came forward with a small yellow pillow, holding a heavy silver ring with a square blue stone and silver fleur-de-lis in the center. The Empress gestured for her to take it, and Chika reached out and slid it onto her finger next to her wedding ring. Next, Lutetia came forward and handed the Empress a long, thin, lacquered cigarette holder that looked to be nearly a foot long. The Empress took it and pulled a thickly rolled piece of incense out of the folds of her kimono, then put the incense in the end of the holder. Suddenly, the end of the incense started smoking. "Plum incense," the Empress explained. "Now watch." Bringing the holder to her mouth, the Empress inhaled deeply before handing it back to Lutetia. Bending down and grabbing Chika's face with both hands, the Empress brought her lips close to Chika's and exhaled the incense through Chika's mouth. A cloud of incense billowed around Chika's head, snaked through her hair, filled her lungs. The burning stream of air tasted bitter in her mouth, like perfume, and made her a bit giddy. She started to feel lightheaded, and as her legs were about to give way beneath her, Chanalandra jumped down from her shoulder. The doll's arms curled around her, holding Chika in the sleeves of her textured kimono, as Chika fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up, she was back in her bed at home in the cottage, just before the alarm would go off to wake Doryo for work at 6 a.m. Still in her pink skirt and black sweater beneath the covers, the white rose lying next to her pillow, Chika saw Chanalandra sitting nearby on the dresser, the cat's golden eyes watching her anxiously as she waited for Chika to wake up. Chika sat up and waved her hand when it looked like Chanalandra would speak. "You! Out!" she whispered. "Wait for me in the sewing room, and we'll talk after everyone leaves." "How did I get home?" "Retrievo and I got you back without any incident," Chanalandra said, scampering down to the floor. "You have to go back tomorrow night." Chika yawned and looked down at her hand. The blue ring with the fleur-de-lis was still there. "Go now, Chanalandra. Doryo will be awake in another 15 minutes. He can't see you like this." The little cat quickly scampered out the door and down the hall, while Chika covered up her strange sleep attire by pulling the covers tightly up around her neck, hoping Doryo would go out for breakfast before she had to get up. Okay, that's the end of video 2. Now we're going to move on to video 3.